Right, we've got this one. Now I've put the Demotte fabric around that. I haven't done the inside, as you can see, because that's going to have a lining at a later date. So I've just put all of that in, and then it just needs a little bit of trimming then to get rid of any of the excess. Don't need all that, so you can just chop some of that out. Alright, and then I need to lay this down and make sure I've got enough. So I've got my fabric out, the creamy colour that I wanted. Make sure that the bias is running through the central part of the hat, so the most of it. If it's going to go on the head this way around, then I want most of the bias to be there. So I'm going to lay that on and just make sure I've got enough. So I'd have enough if I did that side, and my bias is here. So I've got my piece where, you know, I know then that if I lay that down, the bias is going to be running across here. So if I lay my hat here, I know that's on the bias. So just make sure I've got enough. That side, I haven't got any stains on the fabric or anything funny. And I'm just missing a little bit at the end there, so I'd have to bring that in a bit, which means I need to move it slightly further up. So then I've got enough there and enough there. So then I can lay that on it. I don't want to waste the fabric, but I also want to make sure I've got enough to go around. This has got a few creases in it, but because of the beautiful beaded fabric that we're putting on top, it's going to hide all of those. But if you wanted to get rid of your creases because they're too stubborn, then just hold that over the kettle, the steam of a kettle, and it would take out a lot of the creases, especially if it's an organic fabric like silk. So stretch and stretch, and then I can do some pinning. With this fabric, it's very delicate. I want to make sure I don't put any holes in it. I mean, sort of, you know, pull it at all. It's going to pull this end down because it's on the bias, so I can stretch it. I want it to be all nice and tight. So I just put two little pins in there, then stretch this side, and I can stretch this side. Then I can stretch my sides, push that underneath, and just add a few more. Alright, so I've just pinned a lot of that, going around there to around this side, and then I'm going to trim off. So again, I've got about, I mean, you can cut about an inch so that you can cut extra off. You know, it's better to have too much than too little. Or you can cut a centimetre, but then, you know, if it sort of shrinks up slightly because you've pulled one side a bit more than the other, and then you've hardly got any left when you finish sewing that side, it can be a bit annoying. So I would cut an inch so you've got enough overlap, and then you can cut some more off later. all of this off, and now we can do a bit of stitching to keep this down. Okay, now I'm not going to start on an end, I'm just going to start on a middle section, and then I can work up to my end and chop some off. If I start folding all this in now and then folding this in, it gets a bit complicated. So if I just start sewing it down and come up to my point, then I'll fold it all together. So I'm going to do the same stitch as I did yesterday, my more careful stitch, because I don't really want to be coming up through here now. It's getting a bit close. So when we put the beads on, it might hide it all, but you might find it doesn't hide everything. So if I can just do it by catching now fabric to the fluffy demotte fabric underneath there. So, you know, it can be, it doesn't have to be perfect, it can be a little bit rough because you're going to be putting a lining underneath. But just try and get it as neat as possible. I don't want to go right up to the edge here. I don't want to do that because then I might sort of see some of the threads through. And when we put a lovely lining underneath, we want that to be just a few millimeters in from the edge. So I don't want anything messy on the edge. So I'm coming down about 1 centimetre down from the top. Good job I've got a black top on, isn't it, working with this? So you can see. So I've just done my little stitch. I'm just going to do another little stitch to make sure my thread is caught. And then I'm just going to move along, make sure that's flat, it's tight. Move along, and then just fabric to demotte. And then I've got my one thread going along, which is also helping to seal it down, because so the one thread is trapping it all. Move along again about 1 centimetre, fabric to demotte, because I've already secured the demotte to the cinnamon, so I don't need to go through the cinnamon again. So it's sort of like I'm doing an over stitch, just going along. Just doing that so I can see if you can, probably can't see that on white, but I'm just going through a little bit of the fabric that I've just sewn on and the demotte, going through that, then moving along 1 centimetre through a bit of the fabric, along 1 centimetre through a bit more of the fabric and the demotte. So it's always demotte and fabric. So through the fabric and the demotte, along about 1 centimetre through the fabric and the demotte, along 1 centimetre again through the fabric and the demotte, and it's all underneath here. So I'm just going to be sewing all the way to my ends. So if I just carry on with a little bit till I get to the end. So now I'm getting near to my end here. And if I fold that down, I mean, this is very delicate fabric, so I'm not going to get much of a bulk, which is good. But I just want to make sure that I've got the neatest ends possible. So fold over this side. Then I want to fold down, but I want to get rid of some of this excess. So if I just fold both sides over, I can see this extra bit of excess. So I can chop some of this off, but not that much because you want to be able to still overlap it. But I can chop it off with about 1 centimetre free. So I'm just chopping off this little end bit here. Makes it shorter, then open it up again also trim a bit down the sides to it. Only a tiny amount. Then over with this end, to it that side, and to it with this side. Trying to make it as neat and exact as possible, because my lining won't cover the whole of the end. Nice and tight as well. So I've just tried to get it as neat and tight as possible. And then I carry on with my stitching. Now it's going a little bit baggy, there's excess fabric, so I've got a bit of a bag here. If I just push that in, get it away from the edge, flatten it with my fingers, and then start sewing again. I love the inside of a hat as you're making it. It's a bit like when a tailor's making a suit and you can see all of the workings and all of his little stitches and his marks with chalk and things like that. I just love it. I think it's nice to take a picture of the workings as well. And if anybody's ever taken your hat apart, they can take out the lining and see how you've done it. So we've got a little bit of one side done, and now I'm just going to pull in the other side. Always remember as well, when you're sewing this down, you're just grabbing the edge and pulling it over. So I'm just grabbing the edge and making sure I'm pulling it before I do the next stitch, just to make sure, because you don't want any sort of baggy areas on this edge here. So just pull some other fabric, and we've got it pinned, but just pull it again anyway before your next stitch. So I've just done this little section here, and I'm going to come over and go all the way down and all the way around and sort out my end as well. So I've just done this bit here, and I've come up to there, and then I just want to make sure that's all tight, and then come down, do my end like before, and back up again. Okay, now it's going to be the front of the head. This is going to be the back, so it's going to go on, so my ear is here, then this is sitting on the head, this is going to be at the back. I could just pull that in a bit if I want to. So when I put these beads on, they must go in the right way. So now here these beads are quite heavy, they're going down this way, which might not be, let's see, let's put it that way. It could be good because then it's encompassing the head and it's a bit like hair, or we could add a bit more detail, or we could do it the other way around. So just have a think about where you want it to go. So then that'll be that way around. Okay, actually no, I think it's, nope, hang on, what way around? This way around. Okay, I think it's better the original way. So yeah, just play around with it. Also, I don't want to waste this. I'm going to use the smallest section. Okay, I'm just thinking about where to put this. Also with this beading, we don't necessarily want to cut right through a pattern, because then you'll be cutting the thread that's used to sew it on, and then some of the beads might start falling off. So you'd have to then re-sew over that particular end. So if you can cut something out without having to cut through it, then that's better. So I'm just thinking, where can I place this so it's the best, but also I'm not going to end up cutting through one of the flower beaded sections. So I think this is good. There's not too much going on, because I had it just a minute ago where there was like loads of beads all over it, and maybe that was too much. So this looks quite pretty. I've got the flower coming up across here. I've got another bit of a flower detail on the end here, and these beads are nice and thick on here. So you know, we don't really want too many going underneath, because also that'll make that thick. So now if I could just sort of pin this on so it doesn't move too much. That's why it's good then that we haven't got any marks on the underneath one, stitch marks or anything, because we would have seen them. I need some overlap so that I can push it underneath. So here I think I can keep this little flower on. I can cut this section away because it's netting all the way around this piece. This is okay, and the bottom I can pull that bit. Here this is the worst because this is a lot of beautiful detailing and I don't really want to cut through it, but I might be able to cut around it. So I've got very fine veiling up here in between all of the beads, and I want that to go round and underneath, you know, at least half a centimetre if not a centimetre, so we can trap it down and then put the lining on top. That's okay, that's okay. That one I'm going to have to cut here. Shame to lose that bead there, but we're very short there, so I'm going to have to fold these beads underneath. And this one's got a little flower on the end there. It's tricky when you start having beads underneath because it gives you a bit of bulk, so we want to get rid of those. So for this section here, I've got all of this going underneath, so I'm going to have to sew over the end, cut it to across this little mark here, and then just do a few stitches to try and secure the last few beads so they don't come off. going to need a thinner needle just to get through the beads. I've just got to round them to try and secure those a bit. All right, and then we just see that side's okay. That's going to have a bit of bulk going underneath there. Just need to cut some of this off and secure some of these beads. Push that all underneath, and then inside just fold it all over and sew down as before. So, you know, with our ends, pleating those over, folding those over, these bringing them in, sewing down exactly the same way as I did with the top. So I'm just going to get all that done, secure some of the beads, push this underneath, sew it as before, and then we have a look at the next stage. Okay, looking beautiful.